and welcome to Let's Talk, where we sit and discuss issues affecting government and you, the people of Barbados. I'm your host, Paula Harper-Grant, and with me today we have Senior Childcare Officer at the Childcare Board, Esther Bayley-Smith, and Acting Station Sergeant in charge of sex crimes and trafficking, Veronica Shepherd-Whitney. Later we'll be joined by Josette, clinical psychologist at the Childcare Board. Today we'll be discussing the topic of child abuse in the face of COVID-19. Welcome, ladies. Now, before we start, let's just discuss what exactly is child abuse and what is the role of the Childcare Board as it relates to child abuse.
Child abuse entails any acts or injuries inflicted by a parent or a guardian or any person responsible for a child on a child, and we consider a child between the ages of 0 to 18 years old. Child abuse have different facets. It includes physical abuse, which involves injury, hitting, spanking, lashing, burning. It also includes sexual abuse, any inappropriate touching of a child, having sexual intercourse with a child. Those kind of things are considered sexual abuse, inappropriate pictures of a child. Then we also have neglect, which accounts for the highest number of reported cases, and this involves where parents and guardians fail to take responsibility of their child by having adequate supervision, providing for the child basic needs. It also includes neglect from a medical standpoint, where the person fails to look after the health of the child or seek medical attention on behalf of the child. It can also include educational neglect, where the parent or guardian refuse to allow the child to have access to educational activities. There's also verbal abuse, which is, of course, cursing, insulting a child, and calling the child inappropriate names, and emotional abuse, which impacts on the psychological and emotional aspect of a child. The role of Childcare Board is that we provide counseling, advocacy, and empowerment of children and families to deal with these issues of child abuse.
Now, I want to come back to the issue of neglect with you, because I know that right now some of the things that you touched on, it would have changed as a result of COVID-19. But before we get to that, let's discuss the role, because you said sex crimes and trafficking, and that's a little up here when we're talking about children. What's the link between your department and child abuse?
The Sex Crimes and Trafficking Unit of the Royal Barbados Police Force, we work very closely with the Childcare Board. We have a working relationship, I would say, but and that causes us to have a direct contact with the Childcare Board when a matter is reported of abuse of a child. And when I say abuse, we deal with the sexual aspect. If during our interviewing or conducting our investigations of sexual abuse of a child, and the physical abuse is blown up, or we are made aware of physical abuse, we either will handle that problem depending on the circumstances, or is extended to other agencies within the Royal Barbados Police Force, which would be like family conflict or general station investigations at the Criminal Investigations Department. So basically, our role with the Childcare Board is the investigation of sexual offenses. Primarily, we deal with, from the Childcare Board, you find we deal, as Ms. Bayley-Smith mentioned, children between 0 to 18, and we interact very closely in the investigation process with the Childcare Board when we're dealing with minors, especially ones that are like under 10, within the area where we have to involve the use of the childcare officer in terms of getting the information out of the child. Also, the clinical psychologist with the Childcare Board, Ms. Sam, as well as where there's the need to use the anatomical dolls in order to bring out what actually happened to that child so that we can bring the perpetrator to justice. So basically, that is our role with the Childcare Board.
I know that people want to help, and if they see a child being abused, they're going to want to reach out. But is there a particular procedure that needs to be followed, or do I just, if I see something, I say something, I call, I report? Is there any set procedure?
Well, there's no specific set procedure in any type of matter. What I would say is that if you see something happening with a child that you think is unlawful, you can call any police station. right? And then that information will be dealt with by the responding officer. We always have officers on duty who would respond to that report. And depending on the circumstances, they would deal with it from that level, or it is transferred to the various departments within the force, which will be like my department, sex crimes and trafficking, where we deal with the sexual side, or it can be handled by the criminal investigations department, depending on the nature of the case.
Okay, I want to come back to the issue of neglect as we would have been speaking about before, but you touched on it. Now, I also have children, and they also had to participate in online school as a result of COVID-19. And regularly I hear teachers lamenting that this child is not there, or they sign on and then they're not there, or they're not showing up for online class. Is that going to be treated the same as a parent not allowing a child to attend the physical classroom?
Basically, when we receive reports about children not attending viral educational classes, we would investigate, where we would visit the home, invite the parents to come into the office and interview to find out what is happening in the home, what are the restrictions, what are the problems that they're experiencing. If there's need, we would ask for them to look into how best they can get assistance, whether it is getting support from family members, also getting assistance from neighbors, because generally speaking, a child under 12 years old should not be left unsupervised alone without an adult present. So as a result, we work with parents, looking at what ways that they can find solutions to their problems, and give them directions in how they can go forward in protecting children in the midst of their circumstances.
I remember before, it used to really be a village raising a child. So when it is that a parent, because online school was never a factor before, but now we have parents who have to work, and there's a choice between either going to work or staying home with my child, because everybody does not have that extended family unit, okay? So I think that at some point in time, you got to look at, or at least for me, I'm thinking, how do you treat a case where a parent is genuinely going to work and I don't have an extended family, versus a parent who leaves a child unattended at home to go out and party? Are we still going to treat those two the same?
Two different things, because one deliberately going having fun, while one seeking employment and have to look after the finances. Of course, the person who neglects in that they fail to adhere to the parental responsibility of going out and leaving the child unsupervised is going to be treated differently from some person who has to go to work. Of course, we work with both parties with regards to looking at avenues in that you, the parent, still has to put things in place to make sure that your child is protected wherever you go and whenever you're out of the house. As a result, parents are expected to seek alternatives if they're working, to see how best they can work with the employers with regards to maybe shifting their time, allowing flexi time with regards to catering to their children at home. And of course, the person who is partying, of course, we give them stern warnings with regards to going out and leaving their child at home and making sure that they have some person responsible looking after their child.
And what about the police? What is the role of the police in cases like this, where you have, or have you had people calling to report cases of neglect, where it's a case where the parent is genuinely out working but the child is underage and left alone?
Cases of that nature won't come directly to the unit which I represent, but you will find parents would call, or neighbors would call the police station and report these matters. Matters like that, the police get on it right away, right? You will find, as I said earlier, you will find that there are always police officers on duty who will go straight to the house where it is, and that child will be brought to safety. Safety in terms of a police station, the Childcare Board will be informed, as well as they will be obviously looking for the parent of that child or any extended family that can look after that child. It has a lot to do with the time that they call comes to the police station. But whenever we talk to the Childcare Board, there's always some kind of answer, some sort of assistance in terms of children and their safety. So in a case like that, the police will get on it right away, as I said, and the matter will be dealt with. The parent also, there's some aspect within the legislation where the parent will be deemed responsible for leaving that child at home alone, especially depending on the age of the child.
Now, I know a lot of times people will talk about the length of time when they hear about cases with child abuse and they say, oh, that was going on so long. Why is it taking so long? So shed some light. Why would that take so long for those cases to be brought to completion?
Okay, in matters of sexual abuse, depending on the type of offense it is, there are a number of things we, the police officer, have to do. Obviously, the evidence process. We must have the evidence in place, and under the sex offences legislation, Cap 154, there's certain things that we have to look for and to look at, which we in police jargon will call it the points to prove, right? There's also the aspect of statement recording. You will find in some instances, some persons who know of the offence, which we refer to as recent complaint. We also look for aspects of cooperation. You'll find that members of the public would be hesitant in providing the police with a statement. And there are also other areas which have to be touched on in terms of the victim. There will be counseling process, because in some instances, you can't just jump on the victim to get a statement. Depends on the state that they're in. The abuse could be going on for so long that it will have them so traumatized that we would need to have some counseling done. This is where the Childcare Board comes in, right? In some instances, it might reach a stage where it gets psychological, and they may have to be informed that the child clinic section at the psychiatric hospital or the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So it is not that we are not doing anything as police officers. We have to take the interest of the victim, the child victim, into play before we can have that investigation going as you would expect, right? So, and also, along with that, the statement recording, the aspect of getting all the persons involved willing to come forward and give statements to deal with that child, and the process of safety. Another area too is that you may have to remove that child from the residence, right? This is where the Childcare Board comes in. So there's also the settling process. So when I hear the public say that we're taking so long, it's not a situation where we can just jump on it. The interests of the victim, especially child victims, have to be taken into care.
Now, growing up, you used to get beat. And it used to be sometimes your parents take the first thing that comes to their hand and you get beat. And when you talk about it, you just get beat. But now my concern is that, would you say that persons are always, and either of you can answer, are persons always aware of the fact that they are perpetrators? Could it be that they just feel like, look, I used to get beat when they were growing up, and then I turned out very good, and they're beating their child because that's what they know. But then along the way you hear, this is child abuse. Would you say that most of these parents, all of them know that they are in fact perpetrators of child abuse?
I think the main issue is for parents or caregivers generally to understand there's a very thin line between discipline and child abuse. You can discipline a child, and persons are always taught that you don't discipline in anger, because when you're angry, you're going to use more force. When you talk about physical abuse, you're dealing with actual injury or harm done to this child. And in most cases, when persons are punishing the children, they tend to use more force than is usual, and it happens then that the child get injured physically and also emotionally because of it. So adults need to be aware of how they discipline the child and what they use also, because many times when people are angry, they will take up the nearest thing to their hand, whether it's a slipper, a belt with a buckle, and those things cause injury to a child. And they have to realize that when children experience violence, that they in turn perpetuate or accept violence as they grow older.
And added to that, when a case like that is discovered and the punishment is excessive, this is where the police now is involved. We will be able to take that parent, right, looking at the situation, and that parent will be charged and put before the court. There are areas like assault, occasion, actual body harm, that kind of emphasis is placed on, because some of the parents don't even show remorse. Some don't even show remorse, and you can tell, or you can see in that instance, they might not even want the child around, or they're frustrated about the child. There's something that's happening to that individual that is causing them to lash out on the child. So that's too, although we may use the process of charging the parent, we also look at what is happening with them, right? And as Ms. Bayley-Smith said, that is the area where the Childcare Board, along with other agencies, would play a part in dealing with the whole situation.
Now, I'd like to explore the issue of the psychological effects of abuse on the children. So at this point in time, I'd like to thank Station Sergeant Veronica Shepherd-Whitney, and we'll welcome clinical psychologist Josette Sam. Thank you very much. We're now joined by clinical psychologist at the Childcare Board, Josette Sam. Welcome. Now, clinical psychologist, what exactly is the role of a clinical psychologist?
So basically what I do at the Childcare Board, because when you talk about clinical psychologists, you're talking about mental well-being or mental health. And so what I do at the Childcare Board is that persons or families or children that have been referred to me, I engage in psychological intervention to assist them in whatever issues they come with. So, for example, Childcare Board, we deal with a lot of traumas. So because we're talking about things like abuse and neglect, so a lot of the children that would be coming to me or families, they will be coming with issues of trauma. So then I will be engaging in some form of intervention to assist them to work through that, and also incorporating the family in that as well. Also, my role also involves things like doing psychological or psychometric testing. I also do court when there are cases of access or custody and the court wants assessment of the child or counseling for the family. I do those as well. So besides testing, counseling, I do group, and I also do outreach on behalf of Childcare Board, because you also understand at the end of the day that there are still persons within the community that may need a little more education in certain areas of parenting or whatever may be happening, like for example COVID. So I would have done some outreach with COVID from the Childcare Board, reaching out to other government departments and other institutions and so forth.
What do you say, because we've been talking, we say child abuse and we say neglect. Is neglect the most common form of child abuse here in Barbados?
Yes, I must say that neglect accounts for the major reported cases to Childcare Board. And in most cases, when we talk about neglect, we have been seeing a lot where even although we were on lockdown at various times for the whole year, and parents would have been at home, some of them have been accusing each other of not adequately caring for the child. In many cases, sometimes parents have still left children unsupervised even although they're home. And when we're talking about unsupervised, it's like smaller children, sometimes leaving them access to the kitchen where they might have hot water or even making breakfast, and the child goes and pulls down something on them, and as a result the child has to seek medical attention. So in those cases we have to counsel parents, visit their home, see how their home is situated with regards to putting away stuff that might be harmful to the child or securing things in the home. But parents need to be mindful that even although they are present in the home, they still need to supervise children and see what they're doing and make sure that they're accounted for. So that aspect is very important, and parents need to understand that the child is their responsibility and they need to protect the child at all times.
Now I have to turn my attention to the psychologist, because I've been listening to the discussions. COVID has been hard on all of us, young and old. And if, as adults and as parents, we're not even sure how to cope, how is it then, like what tips can you offer, what can we do, or how can parents really help their children to navigate this very stressful and uncertain period that is COVID?
Okay. Well, first thing first is that parents, because all might not necessarily recognize that, you know, it is hard on the child or on children. And so the first thing is to recognize that it has an impact, because one of the things that we are seeing is the whole issue of anxiety and depression sometimes in children. And so you will see things like restlessness, irritability. We talk about adaptation. What has happened with COVID, you have had a lot of adaptation, not just for adults, but also for children. So no longer were they now in the school environment where they learn so many different social skills. No longer were they interacting with teachers in the classroom one-on-one, which is very important for persons with learning disabilities and so forth. So they were now home, and sometimes the parents might not necessarily have the ability educationally to really assist them the way that they should. And then you're in a home, but it might be a dysfunctional home, which would give rise to perhaps increase in abuse or exposure to domestic violence. You have things like, you know, if they're in poverty, if the family's in poverty, remember the school would have had some school programs and so forth. They wouldn't have had that. You know, in terms of accessibility and so forth to the resources to be able to do school, you know, the way how it should be done, that might not be there, though the ministry has tried. So, you know, there are a lot of things that they have to understand that would impact a child. And so sometimes, you know, that may be exhibited, as I said, in restlessness, defiance. In younger children, you may see more temper tantrums and so forth. One of the other things is the whole issue of what I see in my sessions is more and more parents complaining that children are not motivated. They can't get them to do the schoolwork. So I'm seeing actually quite a lot of that, where the children are not really engaging in the learning as they should. Sometimes they have to drag them to go to the class. And then when they have the work to do, then, you know, it is such a difficulty to try to get them to do the work. And simple things like that really tells you that your child is not coping. You know, their eating and sleeping habits may change. So you also have to be aware of some of the signs to look for. The important thing is that you know your child and you know everything about your child, well, you should. So you would know when the child's level of functioning has changed from what it was. Importantly, one of the things that is really, really important at this point in time is support. The kind of support that you give your child. So you have to be validating your child, because if not, you know, some of the things that will be helping your child in the school environment is no longer there. So you still have to let your child feel as if they're important, as if they're still accomplishing things, because you don't want them demotivated. Right? Because really and truly the online learning, you have to have a bit of motivation for that one, and you have to have discipline, and some adults can't even get that done, much less to children. So you want proper supervision and you want support. You want to make sure that your child is connected. Yes, we're going back into the classroom, but you still have the social distances and so forth, but you still want to make sure, even when you don't have that in the online environment, there's nothing wrong or stopping a person from having a family dinner online. Everybody log in and you have your dinner and eat. There's nothing wrong with having family nights, but you want to ensure that you're engaging your children, that your children feel your presence. I know that is pretty difficult sometimes because you have to be managing so much. But when it comes to your child, you have to ensure that you make space for that child, that that child knows that he or she is important, that that child knows, okay, have mommy's attention. So even if it is you're really, really busy and say, okay, well, every night at 7 o'clock to 7:30, that's me and your time, even if we do something. So what you are doing is you're creating quality moments with that child as well, so that child knows that, you know, he or she is important. Right? And routine, you have to make sure that you create routines for the children, because when you don't have that, so school is really, really important. People don't understand the importance, because it gets rid of that sense of unpredictability, and it makes the child feel that they're in a safe environment, that, you know, everything is normal and it continues. So that is why routine is also very important, because you want, yes, so it gives stability, right? So, and that structure, right? So therefore, if you don't have to worry too much because the child has the structure and is operating within that structure, then, you know, that's one thing that you don't have to worry about. You know, there are others that you may worry about, but that's one thing you don't have to worry about. So it's very, very important. That is just some of the basic tips. There are obviously a lot more, but, you know, but those are just some of the basic things that you want to do with your children. They are going back into school. Some of them may be worried. You have to sit down and you have to talk to them. You got to find out what are their fears, and you got to help alleviate those fears. There's some that are going on to the common entrance exam. Some may be worried about CXCs, you know, and the different other exams, and in terms of, no, the world is like this, what does it mean for their future? Because before they may have everything planned out, you know, I get back my results, I apply this and that, but now look how everything is going. What does that mean for me? And so you need to have some real discussion with your children, right? Because, you know, one of the things is that we don't hear from our children enough. We don't. And I think that this is the time that we really need to listen to our children, because they are savvy when it comes to technology. Don't just give them the technology and leave them be, because then the technology will raise your child and they would have some habits and ways that you don't know where they come from. So supervision is very important. And in this age, one of the things is you have to have a good support system in place. A lot of families have dysfunctional families. They don't have anybody that they can call on. And this is the time that you have to repair relationships, because this is the time that we really need each other and we really need the support of each other.
That's some excellent advice. Now, before we wrap up, any parting words from you, Mrs. Bayley-Smith?
Parents need to be there for their children, especially we know that they have been socioeconomic challenges, and even during the COVID period, they take opportunities to spend time with their child. Take, for example, we notice a lot of people have been taking up gardening, and that is something that parents can encourage their children to be involved in. They can do together, and most times children like practical stuff. They like to see that they can plant tomato seeds and see the tomatoes grow, and then they can enjoy picking them and having them to eat at their table. So when children are engaged, then parents can be able to talk with them and find out what is happening with them. And most of all, children then get a sense of reward, seeing that they have contributed something and they're getting some benefit. So it's important in these times for children, for parents to spend time with the children, find activities to do in their home with their children, and also build relationships among themselves. Because at this point in time, we are finding that there's a lot of rift between mothers and fathers, and a lot ending in the court system. And that is where people need to be able to have a sense of putting the children first, putting aside their differences, and sometimes even seeking counseling so that they can get through some of the challenges that they're having because it's impacting on their child.
Thank you so much for joining us today, ladies. It really was a very informative discussion. And if you see something, say something. Call the police or the Childcare Board, or if you can help, please do. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Paula Harper-Grant.